been working here, unfortunately. So we're going to try one more here. And if this doesn't work, then we're going to just wing it and go on. There we go. Here we're coming through. Welcome, my friends. Wonderful. All right. So we are here in our book study, 4,000 Weeks, Time Managed for Mortals by Oliver Burkeman. And we are talking about this section of the book, this chapter, We Never Really Have Time. Sorry, we're not talking about that. We're talking about, give me one moment to get these things where I want them to be. Wonderful. Okay, welcome, my friends. Here we are in our book study. We are talking about 4,000 Weeks Time Management for Mortals. We are reading chapter 8 here, which is pages 125 to, let's see, 140. So we'll give a minute for all of our friends to come in here on Instagram. Hey y'all, welcome. Sorry for the delay. We had some issues on our streaming software today. So I don't know what exactly was going on there. But welcome. We are talking about Time Management for Mortals, our book study, our book club, and looking at being present and how difficult it can be to be present. It's so easy to talk about wanting to be more present, to try to be more present, but in reality, it can be something that's a little bit more difficult. So today we are in our book study. We're reading chapter 8 of 4,000 Weeks. Chapter 8 is titled "You Are Here," and so this is pages 125 to, see, I think it's 138. Nope, I was wrong. It's 135 to 125 to 140. You Are Here by Oliver Burkeman. So today we're going to look at this kind of strange paradox, which is that the harder we try to be present, oftentimes the farther away we actually feel from that experience of presence. And this tendency we have, especially in the West, if you're in places other than the West, please let me know if you feel it in your culture as well. But this tendency to instrumentalize everything, that there's this kind of pathological sense that everything is being evaluated based on what are we getting from it? What are we getting out of it? And we've lost this sense of things just being valuable in themselves. And so Oliver Burkeman talks about how the unfortunate truth about trying to use time well is that the more you focus on using time well, the more each day begins to feel like something that you have to get through en route to some clear, calmer, better, more fulfilling point in the future, which never actually arrives. The problem is one of instrumentalization, where we see everything in our lives as a means to an end. And it's true that, of course, this is the way that we approach life. It makes sense. There's things that we need to accomplish because of what they bring about. But there are also what's called, these are intrinsic goods. Things are good that are just because they are, right? And I think the present moment is one of these things. The present moment is good in and of itself, regardless of what comes out of it. And so it's always worth paying attention to. But he says that we fall into this trap where we treat everything like we're doing life itself and see it as being only valuable insofar as it lays the groundwork for something else. He talks about this quote on page 127 from Alan Watts. And Alan Watts says, "Take education. What a hoax. As a child, you're sent to nursery school. In nursery school, they say you're getting ready to go on to kindergarten. And finally, first grade's coming up, second grade comes up, and then third grade. In high school, they tell you you're getting ready for college. And in college, you're getting ready to go out into the business world." And Watts says people are like donkeys running after carrots that are hanging in front of their faces from sticks attached to our own collars. We're never here, we're never there, and we're never alive because we're always living for the future. And Berkman calls this the causal catastrophe. And this is something that, as I'm reading this book, it's so helpful as I'm sharing it, because I've read it and it moved me, but I see it more and more and more and more, that it's so easy for us to see everything as the means to an end. And so we never get to rest. We never get to enjoy anything for its own sake. We live in a culture where every hobby is meant to be monetized, every skill, every talent to produce income. And one of the things that Berkman reflects on here is how this shows up in parenting, in what he calls the causal catastrophe. He says that children aren't, the sole purpose of a child isn't to become a good future adult. It's to be a child. And when all we focus on is how is this going to affect the child's future, we lose something because we miss this moment right here. He talks about how he recognized this with his own son, trying to do the best this and the best this, but not for him right now, for the future. He said, "It struck me rather more uncomfortably that the reason I'd be seeking all this advice in the first place was because this was my stance on life. That for as long as I could remember, my days have been spent striving for future outcomes. Exam results, jobs, better exercise habits. The list went on and on, in the service of some notional time that I would get there, and then everything would move smoothly at last." He said, now my life just involved a baby, and I was doing the same thing. He says a moment here, "But my son was here, now, and he would be 0 years old for only 1 year. And I came to realize that I didn't want to squander these days of his actual existence by focusing solely on how best to use them for the sake of his future existence. My son was sheer presence, participating unconditionally in the moment, unconditionally allowing himself to be in the moment which he found himself in. And I wanted to join him." The more I grow and develop as a parent, I have 2 children, 1 2, 1 1. The more I'm actually learning from them. And I'm not saying this in a kind of, just a poetic way of, oh, my kids are teaching me so much. But I see my son playing in the dirt. I see my daughter splashing in the water. And it's a beautiful thing to witness, because they're simply right here with what's in front of them. They're not trying to get the most out of it. They're simply present. And this is one of the most important things I've found in my own life, psychologically and spiritually. We have this tendency to grasp onto things, to try to control the future, to try to get things to turn out the way that we want. We want to pull on to good feelings, and we want to push bad feelings away. And all of this action, this mechanism of pushing bad feelings away, trying to grab on good feelings, it exhausts us. And it leaves us disconnected from this moment right here, from pure presence. And so what I learned from my children is a simplicity of life, a simplicity of being here now, of simply being aware. And it's actually something that I'm realizing. I think there's one of the purposes of maybe maybe not purposes, but having children helps us to see what we've lost contact with. Being with children helps us to see what we've disconnected from. The embarrassment that we have to maybe dance in public or be silly or laugh, right? All these ways that we kind of tamp ourselves down. The ways that we are everywhere but here. He says it's true that the future is important. But as the writer Adam Gopnik says, he calls it the causal catastrophe, in which he defines the belief that the proof of the rightness or the wrongness of some way of bringing up a child is the kind of adult that produces it. And that idea sounds reasonable enough, he says on page 131. How else would you judge rightness or wrongness? Until you realize that its effect is to sap childhood of its intrinsic value, because you're treating it as nothing else but the training ground for adulthood. The present moment has to be weighed into the balance. It can't be the case that concerns for the future must always take precedence and priority. There has to be a focus on what it's like to be here right now. And he talks about a story in which there's a child that dies very young and the father is lamenting. And he says the child's life was no less valuable for never coming to fruition of the adult accomplishments. Because children grow up, we think that a child's purpose is to grow up. But a child's purpose is simply to be a child. Nature does not disdain what only lives for a day. It pours the whole of itself into each day, into each moment. Life's bounty is in its flow. And later is too late. We can reflect here too on Sam Harris makes a point that we talk about doing things for the first time a lot. But what we forget is that there's always a last time that we'll do something. There's a last time that we'll see our parents. There's a last time that we will pick up our child. There's a last time that we'll embrace a loved one. There's a last time that we'll read a book. And most of the time, we forget about this until it's too late. Our lives are always moments of saying goodbye, but we don't know which moments of goodbye will be for the last time. Yet usually there will be no way to know in the present moment that you're doing something for the last time. And Harris' point here is that we should therefore try to treat every such experience with the reverence that we'd show if it were the last time we knew we would do it. To treat these moments solely as stepping stones to some future moment is to demonstrate a moment of obliviousness to our real, finite, mortal, human situation. And that level of oblivious would be jaw-dropping if it weren't for the fact that we do it all the time. Because we want to ignore our limitedness. We want to ignore our finitude. We want to ignore the fact that we're going to die. And one of the ways that I've applied this in my own life is it's really easy at the end of the day when I'm putting my children down for sleep to want to rush through it, to want to flip through the pages of the book that I've read, 50 times, to kind of want to get on so I can lay down and sit in bed with my wife and listen to our book. But one of the things that I've started to do when I'm reading my son one of his books for the 15th time this week is I try to remind myself, hey, John Paul, what if this was the last moment, the last time that I had the opportunity to read my son a book? And immediately it puts things into perspective of what a gift it is to be with him right here in this moment. And I certainly don't do that perfectly. I forget a lot, I get frustrated a lot, and I have to remind myself, this could be the last time. And it helps us to realize the privilege with which we approach our own existence. We expect that it's owed to us, that our life is owed to us, that we deserve our future, that we deserve time. But if we can recognize that every moment is a gift, not a given, when we can realize that each moment is just one after another appearing one before us, that I have no control of the breaths that I breathe or the heart that beats within me, the mind that creates these thoughts. When we can realize how little control we have and how much this is just given to us, we can start to savor these moments, enjoying them for what they are. But one of the quickest ways to get out of this mentality, to lose connection with presence, is using each moment, using each experience as a means to an end. And this is something that's deep in our culture, because it's deep in our economic system. Is that one way that we can look at capitalism is that it's a giant machine for instrumentalizing what it encounters. It focuses on drawing out, of creating value, of creating resources. And he says one of the things that points out how problematic this instrumental focus is that there's many rich people in capitalist economies that are often surprisingly miserable. They're very good at instrumentalizing their time, to use our time for the purpose of generating wealth for themselves. And that's the definition of success in a capitalistic world. But in focusing so hard on instrumentalizing their time, they end up treating their lives in the present moment as nothing but a vehicle which to travel towards a future state of happiness. And so their days are sapped of meaning, even as their bank accounts increase. It's very easy for us to fall into this attitude of trying to use our time for some future benefit, of trying to optimize. But Berkman also says we'd be fooling ourselves to put all the blame on capitalism. Because the truth is that we willingly corroborate this state of affairs. We choose to treat time in this self-defeating instrumental way, and we do so because it helps us maintain the feeling of being in omnipotent control of our lives. We like to believe that I'm doing all this work so that one day life is going to open up and I'm going to rush in this new era of happiness where everything's going to be okay. Everything will work out just fine. Where life will be easy. We like to think that we can do all the work up front and then we'll just kind of glide in life. And there's some truth to this, that the way we act now sets up our future. But if we are only focusing on the present moment for what it will bring about in the future, we'll never be able to be happy, because happiness happens now. And so when in the future we have a moment of peace and silence and stillness and connection, we are going to be habituated into this mind of thinking, okay, what am I going to use this for? And this is one of the ways that I think we get so blinded by this obsession. So John Maynard Keyes, page 136, called this purposiveness. He says the purposive man is always trying to secure a spurious and delusive immortality for his actions by pushing his interest in them forward in time. He doesn't love his cat, but his cat's kittens. Nor in truth does he love the kittens, but the kittens, and so forth to the end of catdom. For him, jam is not jam unless it's jam tomorrow, but never jam today. Thus, by pushing his jam always forward into the future, he strives to secure for his act a sense of immortality. He never has to cash out the meaningness of his actions here and now. When we live like this, we get to imagine ourselves as omnipotent, having influence over reality that goes beyond what we actually have. We get to feel like we're the master of time and the master of our lives and the master of reality. But we never get to be alive in this moment. We never get to enjoy what's actually in front of us. Because by trying too hard to make the most out of our lives, we miss them. A haunting phrase that I heard, we rush ourselves, hurrying ourselves to arrive straight into our graves. And at the same time, there's a challenge here. The more we try to be here in the moment, there's a way that we can approach presence where the more we try to be here in the moment, the more it seems like we aren't here. We can try to put so much effort into the presence that we actually then just become obsessed with presence. And so when we try to approach being in the moment in order to kind of benefit our lives, Sam Harris says this, he says, don't meditate because it's good for you. Don't use meditation as an instrument to some other ends, because that's the exact opposite of what meditation is about. Mindfulness meditation, rather, is about being here, period. Not for the sake of something else, but for the sake of simply being here. Because even presence is something that we can approach with this instrumentalist perspective. We can become too self-conscious, wondering if we're being present enough. And the irony, the strangeness of this approach to presence is that we're all already here. We're inescapably in the moment. And if you're inescapably already in a moment, he says on page 140, there's surely something deeply dubious about trying to bring that state of presence about. To try to live in the moment implies that you're somehow separate from the moment, and thus in a position to either succeed or fail. And this shows us how we can just approach presence with another instrumentalist attempt to use it as a means to an end. And this is one of the things that we get the most wrong about mindfulness practice and meditation. So we try to use it. People approach it and say, it didn't work for me. It's not supposed to work for you. Mindfulness is simply being here in the moment. Now, does it come with all types of other benefits? Yeah. But that's not why we do it. We do it because the moment in and of itself is worth paying attention to. When he closes here and he says, quoting J. Jennifer Matthews, we cannot get anything out of life. There is no outside where we could take things to. There's no little pocket situated outside of life to which we could steal life's provisions and squirrel them away. The life of this moment has no outside. Living more fully in the present is simply a matter of finally realizing that you never had any other option but to be here and now. So one of the things that strikes me, brings me in on this chapter, and I want to welcome your questions, your reflections, the things that strike you about this chapter. But one of the things that this chapter really reminds me of is that acceptance, presence, it's not something that we can do. It's not something that comes about because of pride. It's not something that comes because of an intention or an effort. Presence emerges when we stop trying. Acceptance is what happens when we stop trying to be more accepting and simply allow us to be in the moment right now. We're already in the moment. There's no trying that we have to do. It's the trying that's the problem. And unfortunately, we approach the problem of our over-trying by trying not to try. This is one of the moments why silence is so important, why stillness is so important, and why our breath is so important. And so you can try this right now. Your breath, the out-breath, it's your body not doing anything. You breathe in, that's the energy of effort. Then as you let your breath go, it just happens all on its own. So people tell me they don't know how to slow down. They don't know how to do less. They don't know how not to try. But you do. Your breath already knows how. So I want to encourage you here in this moment just to sit here for a moment and notice how your breath, that out breath, it's just naturally letting go. It's letting go all on its own. There's nothing that you have to do for your breath to let go. So you can just bring some attention and notice that here. That your breath is letting go all on its own. And then I want to welcome any questions, thoughts, and reflections here. I'm really interested in the areas in your life where you're trying to be more present, where that effort feels like it's backfiring. Also the areas in your life where you're instrumentalizing. You're seeing everything as a means to an end. And I'm interested too, what are the things in your life that you do not because of what they bring about, but just because they're worth doing? The non-instrumental things, the intrinsic goods. What are the things in your life that you like to do simply because they're good? One of the difficulties with mental health, our approach to mental health, is that we've instrumentalized everything. Again, you see this problem of instrumentalization. We say go on a walk because it's good for your mental health. Eat healthy because it's good for your health. Meditate because it's good for you. Read because it's good for you. But when we do these things because they're good for us, we actually miss something. Because these things are worth doing just because they're worth doing. Because it's a worthy way to live our life. As Arthur Brooks says, happiness is a derivative phenomenon. Happiness is not something that can pursue directly. It's something that comes about because of the way that we live. So I would really love to welcome you all here in the chat. What's striking you today? This is all a part of our book study. So if you're interested in joining the book study, you can comment book study below and I'll send you an invitation to the email list where you get this recording. I'm a healthcare worker and all we do is try. A lot of aspects of our work require so much of us. I want to learn how to let go of the savior complex. Oh, wonderful. I love that. Yeah, I so deeply connect with that sense of, oh no, where did my live stream go? Did I just lose it? Here we go. Huh. I think I just got kicked off my live, guys. That's strange. Am I still here? Can you still see me? My live disappeared. Hold on. I'm not sure if it's still going on Instagram or not. We'll see. Great. Okay, we're back. I'm still going. I'm so sorry, guys. That was very strange. The live feed just completely dropped off. The website exited out. So I'm glad that I'm here. How ironic is this, right? The chapter that we're reading today is "You Are Here," and here I am asking if I'm here, as you guys are all saying yes. So I would love to hear, the thoughts and reflections that you all might have. I actually am forgetting what I was saying. I think maybe we were talking about the Savior complex, but we've got a couple more minutes here for questions. Next week, questions, reflections, ways that you see yourself getting caught in this kind of instrumentalist cycle. I would love to hear about that. And thank you all for letting me know that I am still here. So next week we'll be reading Rediscovering Rest as I'm letting some of these questions come in. We'll be reading chapter 9, Rediscovering Rest in 4,000 Weeks, Time Management for Mortals. That's pages 141 to 160. Rediscovering Rest, chapter 9, pages 141 to 160. But I'd love to hear from you. Any other thoughts you have reflecting on this chapter, reflecting on the places in your life where you find yourself stuck in this instrumentalist cycle. This feeling like you have to make the best out of everything. And that's even something we hear just all the time. Make the best out of us. Make the best out of the moment. iCare says, for all of us doers and achievers, it's so good to experientially learn that being present on its own can do so much for your life, literally. I have so much to say about it, but the space is limited. Yes. Yeah, well, thank you for sharing. Here, I'm curious, one or two things that have come to your mind. One of the things that you can learn, right? Mindfulness is the practice of simply being here. When you realize there's nowhere to get to, you can actually be here, right? Stress is oftentimes the experience of us not wanting to be with the present moment. Us not allowing reality to be the way that it is. Our minds go into opposition against the way things are. And so when we simply allow everything to be the way that it is, we allow ourselves to be here and not use it, it's really quite beautiful. It's quite immersive. So this kind of brings us to a close here for our book club. Thank you all so much for being here. If you'd like to join the book club, just comment book club, book study. I send out an email each Tuesday with a video. So this is recorded, and the video will be sent out on Tuesday with an email reflection. And I usually have some kind of exercises in there, as well as the book that I'm reading is 4,000 Weeks. I'm really glad that you liked it. Yeah, so 4,000 Weeks, Time Management for Mortals by Oliver Burkeman. If you'd like to join the book study, like I was saying, I send an email out on Tuesday morning. It has a reflection that I write, kind of an essay, and then usually some questions to invite you to reflect on, to think about your life. And it also has, sometimes I'll have kind of a practice in there, kind of a guided journaling exercise or meditation practice. But really what this is about is kind of understanding how to be more fully here in the moment, how to let go of our need to control things, how to be alive. So thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate the chance to be with you all. And tune in next week, next Friday, 12:15. We'll continue talking. All right, peace, y'all. I haven't read Meditations yet, though I'd like to read it sometime. That's I've heard many good things from Meditations. So yeah, we'll close it up here for today. Thank you all for being here. Comment book club if you want to hop on in. And I wish you all the best. I hope you guys have a great Friday, great weekend. And I'll see you next week. Peace.